Welcome back to the deep dive. I am so glad you're here because today we are opening up a file that honestly it kept me up last night. You know those moments where you read something and it's like someone reached into your brain and just rearranged the furniture?
Oh, I do.
That is exactly what happened to me with this source material.
It's a fascinating feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
When a narrative you've accepted your entire life, something that's just, part of the cultural wallpaper, suddenly gets peeled back.
Yeah.
And you realize there's a completely different picture underneath.
Exactly. And the wallpaper we are peeling back today is one of the most famous stories in human history. If you grew up in the West or really anywhere with even a tiny touch of religious influence, you know the story of Jacob. You might not know all the details, but you know the image.
They're wrestling match.
The wrestling match, it's iconic. A man alone in the wilderness, wrestling in the mud all night long. And the punchline, the cultural takeaway we've all been fed since, I don't know, Sunday school or literature class, is that he is wrestling with God.
It's the ultimate archetype of the spiritual struggle, right? That's how it's always presented.
Right. It's framed as this test of grit, the
Yeah.
human spirit striving against the divine. It's Rocky meets theology. The idea is that if you hold on tight enough, if you struggle hard enough, if you have enough, hustle, you can literally wring a blessing out of the Almighty's hands.
And it's often taught as a lesson in persistence. We frame it as a virtue.
Mm.
The Israel identity, which comes from this very story, is traditionally interpreted as one who struggles with God or prince with God.
Mhm.
It's almost a badge of honor for the stubborn. It suggests that God, respects the fight, that he wants you to grapple with him until he gives you what you want.
Well, buckle up, because today we are tossing that reading right into the shredder. Or rather, the source material we're diving into is taking a sledgehammer to it. We're looking at a text titled, From the Flesh of Jacob to the Spirit of Israel, Victory over False Gods and Rest. And let me tell you, the thesis of this text is going to sound radical to a lot of people.
It is a radical reinterpretation, yes.
Yeah.
But it's not just being controversial for the sake of it. The source builds a very methodical, linguistic, and logical argument. It posits that the idea of Jacob wrestling with God, specifically the true God, is actually a mistranslation.
The mistranslation.
Yes, the source specifically cites the King James Version as a culprit here, but the issue goes deeper than just one Bible version. The argument is that this mistranslation has fundamentally messed up our understanding of human nature, of spiritual warfare, and what it actually means to find peace.
So the mission for this deep dive is clear. We're going to unpack the duality of human nature. We have Jacob on one side and Israel on the other. But if this source is right, becoming Israel doesn't mean you fought God and won. It means something almost the complete opposite.
It suggests that Israel actually means one who defeated the false god, or the deceitful spirit.
One who defeated the false god. That is a massive distinction. It changes the genre of the movie entirely.
It changes the hero and it changes the villain. I mean, think about it. If you wrestle God and win, you're the hero because of your strengths. You overpowered the divine. But if you defeat a false god, a demon, an accusation, a fear by relying on the true God, then you are the hero only because of your surrender.
Okay, that is a huge cliffhanger to start on. But before we get to the wrestling match, we have to understand the wrestler. We have to talk about Jacob. Because you can't understand the victory if you don't understand the man who is fighting. And the source.
No.
Yeah, the source does not like Jacob.
No, it certainly does not pull any punches. It views Jacob not as a holy patriarch, in the beginning, but as a cautionary tale. And to understand why, we have to start where the source starts, with etymology.
Words matter.
Names matter,
Yeah.
especially in these ancient texts. A name isn't just a label, it's a destiny. It's a character profile. And the name Jacob, it is not a compliment.
The source defines Jacob as plunderer.
Yes. Plunderer, deceiver, supplanter. The literal Hebrew root has to do with the heel. It means one who grasps the heel. Just think about that imagery for a second. It's someone running behind you, reaching out to trip you up so they can get ahead.
So he's a backstabber. He's the guy in the office who, steals your project idea and presents it as his own.
Essentially, yes. The source paints him as the archetype of the outer person. And this is a really key concept in the text. The outer person is the version of us that operates according to the flesh, or, our base human instinct.
And the text gets pretty heavy here with the descriptions. It connects this outer person directly to what it calls devil's attributes. It says before spiritual transformation, specifically meeting Jesus, in the text's theological view, humans act like children of the devil.
That sounds incredibly harsh to modern ears. It
Yeah.
really does. We like to think of humans as generally good, maybe a little flawed, But the source is taking a hardline stance on human nature apart from grace. It argues that the default setting of the Jacob nature is lying, killing, and plundering. It's a scarcity mindset.
Scarcity mindset. That's a good way to put it.
It is. If you don't believe the true God will provide for you, how do you get what you need? You have to take it. You have to manipulate. You have to plunder.
Which brings us to the evidence. The source lays out what it calls case studies in deception. And Jacob really was the ultimate con artist. I mean, we think of biblical figures as these like stained glass window saints. But Jacob is running a long con on his own family.
He is the hustler. He is the original fake-it-till-you-make-it guy, but in the most destructive way possible. The first case study the source points to is the famous incident with the red bean porridge, or pottage.
The most expensive bowl of soup in the history of culinary arts.
Quite literally. So you have Esau, Jacob's older brother. He's the hunter, the man's man. He's out in the field working. He comes home, and he is famished. The text implies he's, hypoglycemic, shaking, feels like he's going to die.
He's angry. We've all been there. You're not thinking straight.
Exactly. He is vulnerable. Now, a brother, a neighbor, in the biblical sense, would look at a starving family member and say, here, sit down, eat. That's compassion. That's humanity.
But what does Jacob do?
Jacob sees leverage. He doesn't see a brother. He sees a business opportunity. This is predatory negotiation. He says, sure, I have food, but I want your birthright in exchange.
It's so cold. It's just, I'll save your life, but you have to sign over your future.
And he does it. Esau is so desperate he agrees. But look at Jacob's heart there. He is plundering his brother. He is swindling him out of the rights of the firstborn, which meant leadership of the clan, a double portion of the inheritance, and the spiritual lineage, all for a bowl of red beans.
It's a scam. It's taking advantage of distress. And then, if that wasn't enough, the source brings up the second case study, the goat hair disguise.
This one is even more theatrical. It honestly reads like a farce or a bad sitcom plot, but the stakes were deadly serious.
So set the scene for us.
Isaac, the father, is old. He's blind. He's dying. He wants to give his final irrevocable blessing to Esau, the firstborn. He tells Esau, go hunt some game, make me a meal, and I will bless you.
And Jacob and his mother, Rebekah, they overhear this.
Right. And they hatch a plan. Jacob needs to steal that blessing. But there's a problem. Esau's a hairy man. Jacob is smooth-skinned. Isaac might be blind, but he can still touch.
So what do they do?
It's insane. Jacob literally kills young goats and wraps their skins around his hands and the smooth part of his neck. He puts on Esau's clothes so he smells like the field.
Just imagine the nerve that takes. You are walking into your dying father's tent. You have goat skins taped to your arms. You're holding a bowl of food. And you are lying to his face.
And Isaac even suspects something. He's not completely fooled. He asks, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He asks him directly, are you really my son, Esau?
And Jacob looks his father in the eye, or at least looks at his blind eyes, and says, I am.
It is the definition of a Jacob move. It is total deception. It is human virtue or human methods at their peak. It's the belief that I have to grab, trick, disguise, and hustle to secure my future because no one else is going to do it for me.
But here is the kicker, and this is the expert insight from our text today that really struck me. Did it work?
Well, technically, yes. He got the verbal blessing, but look at the outcome. The source points out the deep irony here. Despite all this hustle, despite the soup scam and the goat hair ruse, Jacob's life was defined by suffering, not success.
He didn't get to enjoy the blessing.
Not at all. He immediately becomes a fugitive. Esau says, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, then will I slay my brother Jacob. Jacob has to run for his life. He leaves the home he just won.
And he goes to his uncle Laban.
And this is where the universe, or God, seems to have a real sense of humor. Laban is an even bigger scammer than Jacob. Jacob meets his match. He spends 20 years working for Laban, and Laban cheats him over and over again. He cheats him out of his wages. He cheats him in marriage, tricking him into marrying Leah instead of Rachel.
The deceiver being deceived. It's cosmic justice, almost.
Exactly. So the takeaway from this Jacob segment is that the hustle, this human strategy to secure blessings by trickery, is ultimately futile. The source calls it vain and exhausting effort. You can strive, you can wear the goat hair, you can exploit people, but you cannot steal true rest. You cannot steal a blessing that actually brings peace. You just end up a wealthy fugitive, always looking over your shoulder.
Which brings us to the crisis, because you can only run for so long. Eventually, the road runs out, and for Jacob, the road ended at the Jabbok River. This is segment 2 of our dive, and this is where the movie shifts from a heist film to a horror film.
It really is a terrifying moment. Jacob is finally returning home after 20 years. But he knows Esau is coming to meet him, and he gets word that Esau isn't coming alone.
400 men?
That is not a greeting party.
No. That is a hit squad.
In Jacob's mind, absolutely.
Yeah.
He assumes this is the day the bill comes due. He thinks, my brother is coming to kill me and take everything I have.
So we see the Jacob nature kick in again, right? He starts strategizing. He's back to his old tricks.
He does. He splits his camp into two groups, thinking if one gets slaughtered, the other might escape. He sends waves of expensive gifts ahead to try and bribe Esau. And then, as night falls, he takes his wives, his children, his servants, everyone he loves, and sends them across the ford of the Jabbok River.
And he stays behind.
He stays behind, alone, in the dark.
Why alone? What do you think is going through his head there?
The text doesn't explicitly say, but the source implies he is at the end of his rope. I mean, maybe he's praying, maybe he's hiding, maybe he just can't bear to watch his family die if Esau attacks in the night. But he is isolated, and that is when it happens.
A man appears, and they wrestle.
Now, we need to slow down here, because the source zooms in on a detail that I think most of us skim over when we read this story. We focus on the wrestling, the physical struggle, but the source focuses on the injury, the breaking point.
The text says the opponent struck Jacob's thigh joint.
Right. And in our modern context, we hear a thigh injury and we think, oh, he pulled a hamstring. That's painful.
Yeah.
But in the ancient Near Eastern context, and specifically in the biblical symbolism, the source is unpacking thigh or loins. It means something very, very specific.
It's not just a leg muscle.
No. The source identifies this anatomy, the groin, the thigh, as the place where seed comes from. In the biblical worldview, this is the seat of life. It is the source of reproductive power. It represents the future. It represents a man's capability to generate a legacy.
So when the opponent strikes him there, it's symbolic. It's not just about winning the match.
It is a symbolic castration of his self-reliance. It is a devastating blow. It's not just ouch. It is the total removal of human strength. The source argues that by striking this joint, the opponent destroyed Jacob's reproductive power.
Meaning he could no longer birth his own solutions. He couldn't create his own way out anymore.
Precisely. Up until this moment, Jacob has always birthed his own way out. He used his wits, his energy, his schemes to create a future. But now, that power is broken. He is physically incapacitated in the very seat of his manhood and strength.
That is profound. It's like the universe is saying, you think you can hustle your way out of this with Esau? You think you can create a solution? No. That part of you is done.
It is the death of the Jacob nature.
Yeah.
Because a plunderer needs strength to take. If you have no strength, you can't take anything. You are helpless.
So once his thigh is broken, once the fight is effectively over because he can't stand what happens, he doesn't let go.
This is the shift. The source points out that once his physical ability, the thigh, is broken, Jacob can no longer fight with muscles. He physically cannot wrestle in the sense of trying to pin the opponent. So what does he do? He clings.
He just holds on.
He holds on for dear life. He switches from fighting with human virtue to fighting with faith. He realizes, I cannot beat this. I am broken. My only hope is to hold on to this being and demand a blessing.
It goes from a wrestling match to a desperate embrace.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It is the embrace of a man who has nothing left but desperation. He is refusing to let go until the situation is resolved by a power greater than himself.
So we have Jacob, broken, clinging to this opponent in the pitch black of the riverbank. And this leads us to the most controversial and honestly the most fascinating part of the source material, segment 3, the Elohim controversy.
This is where we have to put our detective hats on.
Yeah.
Because the identity of the opponent changes everything.
Okay, so the standard view, the one I've always heard, is that Jacob wrestled God, or the angel of the Lord. It's theophany God appearing in human form to test Jacob.
And the source material calls that idea laughable.
Laughable. That is a confident stance. That's a strong word.
It is. But the source backs it up with a logical syllogism that is, well, it's hard to refute. Let's walk through the premises the source provides. Premise 1. Jacob was terrified of Esau.
Right. We established that. He's shaking in his boots. Esau is a man, a human.
Premise 2. God is the Almighty. He's the creator of the universe. He's infinitely more powerful than Esau.
Obviously. Yeah.
So the conclusion, if Jacob is scared to death of a human, how on earth could he possibly defeat the Almighty God in a wrestling match?
When you lay it out like that, it does seem absurd. I'm scared of my brother, but I just put God in a headlock and refuse to let him go.
It doesn't track logically. If Jacob is too weak to face Esau, he is certainly too weak to face Yahweh. The source argues that the idea of a human beating God or even wrestling God to a draw is a theological impossibility.
But the text says he wrestled with Elohim. Doesn't Elohim mean God? That's what I've always been told.
This is where the linguistics come in. In Hebrew, Elohim is a plural noun. It's most often translated as God with a capital G. But the word itself is a category. It describes a type of being. Depending on the context, Elohim can mean gods with a lowercase g. It can mean spiritual beings. It can mean magistrates or judges. It can even mean angels or demons.
So it's like the word spirit. If I say, I saw a spirit, that could be an angel, it could be a ghost, it could be a demon. The word itself doesn't tell you the moral alignment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You have to look at the context to determine which Elohim is being discussed. And the source argues that the context here points to a false god or a messenger of Satan.
A messenger of Satan. So Jacob isn't wrestling God. He's wrestling a demon.
He is wrestling the spiritual embodiment of his own fears, his own deception, a false god that has come to destroy him. I mean, think about the timing. He is about to enter the promised land. He is about to face his past. Who would want to stop him?
The accuser, the enemy.
Right. And then there is this fascinating detail about the sunrise that the source highlights. I think this is the smoking gun for their argument. The text mentions that as the dawn began to break, the opponent begged to be released. He says, "Let me go, for the day breaketh."
I always thought that was so weird. Why is God afraid of the sunrise?
Exactly. If it's God, he made the sun, he is the light. Why would he need to flee from the daylight? It sounds like a vampire story.
Laughs. Right. The sun is coming up. I'm gonna sizzle.
The source offers a compelling interpretation here. The sun symbolizes the arrival of the true God, the light of truth. In a spiritual sense, the darkness cannot stand the light. As the sun representing God's presence began to rise, the dark messenger, this false god, lost his power. He had to flee. He couldn't exist in the presence of the true God.
That makes so much more sense of the narrative dynamics. The opponent isn't testing Jacob. The opponent is trying to destroy Jacob, but he runs out of time because God is showing up.
Yes, and Jacob, even though he is broken, even though his thigh is shattered, he refuses to let this dark spirit go until he admits defeat. Jacob says, "I will not let you go except you bless me."
Now, usually when we hear bless me, we think he wants money or a promise of safety, something tangible.
But in this context, the source argues the blessing is the surrender of authority. He is forcing the false god to acknowledge that he has no power over Jacob anymore.
He's demanding the opponent acknowledge that he has lost.
Exactly. And that's when the name change happens. The opponent asks, "What is your name?" And he has to admit it, Jacob. "I am the deceiver. I am the plunderer." He confesses his nature.
And the opponent says, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel."
And this brings us to segment 4, redefining Israel. This is the pivot point of the whole episode. This is the mind-blowing part you mentioned at the start.
Because if the opponent wasn't God, then Israel can't mean one who wrestled God and won.
Correct. The traditional definition relies on the opponent being God. If the opponent is a false god, the name must mean something else. The source posits that Israel means one who defeated the false god or deceitful spirit
One who defeated the false god.
by relying on the power of the true God.
That is a total flip. It's not about overcoming God with your strength. It's about overcoming the devil with your weakness.
Precisely. You become Israel, not when you muscle your way into heaven. You become Israel when you realize your own helplessness, the broken thigh, and rely entirely on grace to drive back the darkness.
This has massive theological implications. It shifts the focus from the outer person, Jacob the striver, to the inner person, Israel, the victor over darkness.
It does, and the source makes a very strong connection to Jesus here. This is the Jesus connection.
Right, because in Christian theology, Jesus is often called the true Israel. He fulfills the destiny of the nation.
Exactly. Now, let's apply the logic of the source. Did Jesus ever fight God the Father?
No, that's contrary to the whole New Testament. I and the Father are one. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he didn't wrestle against God. He submitted to God. Not my will, but yours be done.
Precisely. It would be absurd to say Jesus is the ultimate Israel if Israel means fighter of God. That would make Jesus an enemy of the Father. But did Jesus fight the ruler of this world? Did he fight Satan?
Yes, constantly, in the wilderness temptations, in casting out demons, and ultimately on the cross.
So, if Jesus is the ultimate Israel, and Jesus fought Satan, not God, then the title Israel must mean victor over Satan.
Oh, that clicks. That really, really clicks. If Jesus is the archetype, then the definition has to fit him.
The source is very explicit about this. Jesus is the ultimate Israel because he defeated the devil. But notice how he did it. He didn't use Jacob methods. He didn't use deception. He didn't use plundering. He didn't use political maneuvering. He used truth, sacrifice, and total reliance on the Father. He defeated the darkness by submitting to the light.
This is, wow. It really reframes the whole spiritual journey. It's not about getting strong enough to arm wrestle God. It's about getting honest enough to admit you can't fight the devil alone.
That's it. That is the core message.
So let's bring this down to earth. We've got these two natures. Segment 5. The two natures and the promise of rest. The source argues that Jacob and Israel are effectively the same physical person, but with a completely different spirit or inner person.
It's a psychological and spiritual duality that exists within all of us. We all have a Jacob inside us.
Let's identify that Jacob in our modern lives. Who is he or she?
He is the hustler. He is the anxious one. He is the voice in your head that says, if I don't manipulate this situation, I'm going to lose. If I don't lie on this resume, I won't get the job. If I don't pretend to be someone I'm not, if I don't put on the goat hair, I won't be loved.
It is the fear that there isn't enough to go around, the scarcity mindset we talked about.
It is the constant looking over your shoulder for Esau. It is living in a state of chronic stress, believing that your safety depends entirely on your own scheming.
It sounds like modern burnout culture. It sounds like the rat race.
It is exhausting. The source calls it the way of the outer person. It is characterized by anxiety, scheming, and fear. You are always trying to secure a blessing through effort. And the text says this effort is vain. It doesn't work.
So the question is, how does one make the switch? How do you go from Jacob to Israel in reality?
The source outlines a condition for transformation, and it's counterintuitive. The condition isn't try harder, it's actually give up.
It goes back to the broken thought.
You have to acknowledge the weakness. You have to recognize the Jacob nature, admitting that without spiritual intervention, you are a plunderer or scammer at heart. You have to admit that your human effort, your thigh, cannot achieve the true blessing.
That's the surrender.
That is the surrender, and the destination of this surrender is rest.
The source quotes a famous passage here, Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary.
And I will give you rest. Think about Jacob's life. He was weary, always running from Laban, running from Esau, running from famine. He never had rest. But Israel enters into eternal rest. Why? Because Israel isn't fighting alone anymore. Israel has tapped into the power of the Almighty.
The Jacob life is fear. The Israel life is peace.
And that peace comes from victory. But not a victory you won with your fists. A victory you won by holding on to the one who can win for you.
It's moving from trying to grab blessings through trickery, the Jacob way, to receiving victory through surrender, the Israel way.
That is the synthesis. And notice the progression of the anatomy. Jacob starts his life by grabbing the heel, trying to trip people up with his hand. Israel ends his transformation by being touched in the hip, being broken by God so he can be healed. The hand of the grasper becomes the limp of the believer.
It's amazing how just changing the perspective on who the opponent was changes the entire moral of the story. It goes from be strong and fight God to be weak, trust God, and defeat the enemy.
It completely inverts the spiritual lesson. And I think for many people, that is a much more liberating message. Be strong and fight God is terrifying. You're going to lose that fight. And honestly, why would you want to fight the source of all good? But trust God, and he will drive away your fear. That is good news.
This definitely challenges the way I've always pictured that night at the river. I always pictured a heroic struggle, a gym montage. But maybe it was a desperate defense against the darkness, just waiting for the sun to rise.
And realizing that the sun does rise. That is the promise. The dawn breaks and the shadows flee.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've traveled a long way. We started with a bowl of red bean soup and ended at the riverbank of destiny. We've seen the plunderer become the victor. We've retranslated a name that defines a nation.
We've seen the flesh give way to the spirit. We've seen that the outer person has to be broken so the inner person can rule.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about regarding our own lives. We all have that tendency to want to control the outcome, to put on the goat hair disguise, to make the shady deal, to act like Jacob because we are scared.
We do. It's human nature. It's the Jacob reflex. When we get scared, we scheme. When we feel threatened, we plunder.
So here's the final provocative thought for you, the listener. If the Jacob mindset is about constant striving, hustle, and manipulation to survive, and the Israel mindset is about surrender and rest, where are you currently operating?
Are you exhausted? Are you still trying to wrestle a blessing out of the universe with your own two hands? Are you fighting battles you were never meant to fight alone?
Or are you ready to have your thigh broken, metaphorically speaking, so you can finally stop fighting and start receiving?
That is the question. The source suggests that true victory looks a lot like surrender. It suggests that you don't win by being the strongest person in the room. You win by being the one who refuses to let go of the truth.
Maybe the thing you're wrestling with isn't God holding out on you. Maybe it's a false God fear, anxiety, the past trying to keep you tired.
And maybe the sun is about to rise.
I love that image. Look deeper into the definitions, everyone. Sometimes the words you think you know hold the biggest surprises. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.